Okay, awesome. Hey everyone, I'm Shreya, and we're back at it in week 2 of the GameDev Gameathon 2020, hosted by Bit Project. So far, you've gone through all of the Unity and Game Maker workshops, as well as some cool career panel-based workshops last week. And we have a lot more career panels, professional development-based events happening this week, as well as the actual game development, project building, stand-ups, everything that's in schedule. And we're really excited to see what projects you make. So today we have Daniel Rose, game developer and professor, who is going to tell us a little bit about his journey in the game industry and what it's going to sound like for you guys in the future as well. So yeah, Daniel, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you, Shreya. Hi. So I'm Dan, and I am terrible at operating slides. I am a 10-year veteran of the games and entertainment industry as a whole, and I'm going to kind of take this time to talk to all of you about my journey to break in and getting that first job and what's changed since then, and kind of give you some ideas on how all of you can kind of plan on how you might want to, structure a break-in plan for yourself. Um, so I don't have like a full-on resume here in front of me, but the quick hits are that I've been working for about 10 years or so. I have a lot of ship titles to my name. There's a handful of big ones. The one you're going to be hearing a lot about today is one of my personal favorites. It's Uncharted Golden Abyss on the PlayStation Vita, the greatest game console ever made. Um, but I also have a handful that have shipped on PC, Xbox, PS3. My most recent shipped project was the Shadow of the Colossus remake, where I was a contractor down in Austin, Texas with Bluepoint. So I've been around, and I've worked on a number of different projects in a number of different ways, from being an in-house worker to being a freelancer who's working on a contract basis. So I've got a lot of experience in a lot of different regions of the industry. I also have done some work outside of games too. I've used Unreal Engine, and it's before it became super popular for previs. I used it on a project in New York in 2016. And that was something that was kind of like an experimental VR advertisement campaign type deal. Today, I am a professor at Drexel University. I teach students there modeling, texturing, Unreal Engine, and I help a lot with the senior game projects. Drexel has a program where the final year is geared around, if you're a game student, creating your own game with your own team. And they have this project advisor role, and I relish the opportunity to continue doing that. And I'm advising a team again this year, and it's an exciting project, and I'm hoping it goes really, really well. So this talk is going to be focused on the journey that you take, the mountain that you climb to get a job in the game industry. The industry's grown a lot since I started, but it's just as difficult, if not more so, to get that foot in the door. So it remains very difficult to do. Something that's also difficult is staying in. Longevity is a problem, and it's not just an issue with people burning out and crunch. It's also an issue with whether or not you want to relocate a lot for work, and whether or not you want to continue to pursue different types of projects. But changes are happening, and we're not just talking about COVID changes. There have been some changes overall. So the way the industry is going to operate in the future might benefit everyone here. So I broke in starting with a plan. So my beginning started once I graduated college. It was summer of 2009 in central Indiana. So I don't know if any of you are from that region or any other place like it, where you're in a tiny town surrounded by cornfields. But that's what I kind of grew up around. That's what I grew up in. So I had a portfolio that was made up of student work, and it was very clearly student work. So I didn't have a good enough portfolio, and there were no job prospects, both because of that and also my location. In 2009, the Midwest got crushed by the Great Recession, so I had no opportunity in the town I lived in. So January 2010 came around, and after talking with another friend of mine who was pursuing the same career goals, I came up with a 6-month plan to go from this to this. What you are looking at is what I went from a senior year project at Drexel University to the final project as part of this 6-month plan. So it's a complete portfolio tear down and redo. Tossed everything and started brand new. I focused on 3 environment pieces that was 100% using all work created by me. I focused on using Maya and Unreal Engine because Maya was the main tool at the time and it was what I was most familiar with. And Unreal Engine was just released to the public in the form of Epic's UDK toolkit. So I was able to actually use it for the first time. This was what I treated as my full-time job until around July. And as part of this full-time job, I also had to be active on the Polycount community. This was how I got feedback because it's not like I was surrounded by classmates anymore. I was living at home with my parents. So I needed to find a way to get feedback from people. So I focused on community, and Polycount was the place to go at that time. There's a pretty small amount of interaction when I was part of that community, and I technically still am, but much less active these days. But it was perfect for feedback. I got a lot of tips on how to improve my work, and I got to see what other professionals were doing. At the end of this time, it would have been July, and the applications became free-flowing. So the results of all of this, they don't exactly hold up today. We're talking about work that was produced 10 years ago, but at the time, it was just enough to get me a couple of art tests. So this was my first piece. This was the first piece that I had finished. This is actually based off of a reference photo of downtown Kokomo, Indiana. So shout out to the greatest city in the world. This was built and rendered in Maya. I had not shifted to Unreal Development Kit yet. And I could sit here and break it down, everything that's wrong with it all day. But the key thing I think that really stands out compared to my previous work is that it actually you know what it is. It's not kind of abstract and focused on these really nebulous, muddy details. You can see what everything is. It's not great. There's a lot of low poly detail here that just doesn't hold up today, but it was done and I was proud of it. And this led to my second work, which was inspired by Borderlands at the time. And it's a significant improvement in both how the models look as well as how the lighting is being done. This work has its own problems too, but it stands up much better. It stands up to the test of time because a little bit of its style that's here. This one was based off of a concept that I pulled from online. I knew that I did not have the chops to create my own concepts. And so grabbing some from online led me to focus on using someone else's composition and tools to build up my own scene. And then finally, there was this one, the fantasy little scene here. And this one was originally supposed to be larger, but I scoped it down to make it into the time frame I had given myself. And from here, I did use a little bit of my own imagination and concept to some degree anyway. And again, it has problems. It doesn't really hold up, but you saw the difference going from a school project to this in the course of 6 months. The change in detail is immense. It went from someone who was playing around with tools to someone who looks like they know what they're doing. So I executed on my plan to the best of my ability at the time, and I started applying for jobs. And when you apply for jobs, that's when you kind of hit the luck button, or you roll your D20 and cross your fingers. I am someone who does very much believe the role that hard work has in your success, but there's always some degree of luck that's involved. The work is required so that when the luck comes around, you're able to actually capitalize on it and have a greater set of odds in your favor. If you don't work and you just keep rolling that, D20 die, hoping to hit that D20, hoping for that crit, you're not necessarily going to hit it. And even if you do hit it, if you're that lucky person who just always manages to somehow get something, that doesn't mean that that luck is going to hold. Studios know whether or not you're able to execute once you are hired. And if that's the case, your luck will run out. I am not one of these lucky people. I tend to roll nat ones more than d20s. So I ended up only scoring 2 art tests from the dozens or more applications that I sent out. One was a paint test. It was for the now dead 38 Studios. And I got it because more than likely my buddy was at the studio at the time and he probably advocated for me. He did his best to help me with the test itself, but I am not a painter. I am not great at that particular workflow. So I was proud again of the work I did for that test, but it did not go through. The other test was from the studio that would eventually hire me. So you're going to actually end up seeing some minor results of this test. You'll get to see the model and texture that I was asked to make. The other part of that test was the collision that they had requested. So they sent the test. It was a Word document. They wanted it in a week, I believe. And it was supposed to be done all in Maya, which was good for me because I knew the tool. I knew how to model and texture. So that was a plus. But I had a lot of pressure on me because I hadn't had a lot of bites, and I was very concerned that this wasn't going to work out. And I am not kidding you. My backup plan was some form of military service. I wear glasses, so the one I wanted, the Air Force, probably would not have worked out very well. So I had a lot of pressure on me, and I was nervous. Like, this is a studio. This is Sony. I'm kind of a Sony fan. Like, I admit to that. I've been a PlayStation player since PS2, and I'm a big fan of some of the projects they make. And it was, kind of crazy that, oh, I'm doing a test for them. Okay, how do I calm these nerves? So I had to tackle all of that as well as account for having to do something I had never done before, because I made a very cool, I made these nice environment scenes, but I never thought about how they worked in the context of the game. And that's where collision came in. I had never made collision models before, and the test requested that I both provided collision models for a scene that they gave me. It was a very small scene, and that I also create collision for the prop I'm making. So I had to make that work. Luckily, I did. I have been told multiple times throughout my career that I tend to be more technically sound. And considering that I had never done collision before, they were very surprised with the quality of the collision work that I had done. They don't usually get brand new junior artists who do collision to the level that I did. So they were very, very surprised. And I did the prop well enough that they were okay with bringing me aboard. Of course, looking back on it today, the prop is, it doesn't hold up. And sure, some of that has to do with the technology of the time. So Bend is known for making PSP games, and this was their PS Vita game. So we're talking like low polygon counts here. But it also has to do with how I created it. Because I made this, this texture sheet in Photoshop, and I baked my normals using old programs. And I didn't realize that I could have laid this out in a far more efficient way, where I could have used a lot of this space, cut this in half, mirrored my UVs. And if you don't know exactly what I'm talking about, that's okay. Just keep these terms in mind. You'll hear them in your classes, or as you scour the internet looking for tips. I could have worked on my maps in a way where you don't see this ugly, like, waviness down at the bottom. There was a lot that I could have done to make this look better, but it was enough. And sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes enough is all you can do, and you take the win and move on. And that's what I did here. So in addition to my luck at this point, a smaller window to the lucky component of this is that I didn't have a ton of competition. Bend is a small studio. They're much larger now. If you've played Days Gone, you can imagine going from handheld games to that. But at the time, they were small. They were PSP focused, and they were and sort of still are kind of remote in the game sense, in a game dev sense. No, they're in the middle of Oregon. And there's some studios in Eugene, but that's like a 3-hour drive. San Francisco's a 10-plus-hour drive. It's not super easy to get to. At the time, not many people were applying to them, and they needed people to start. And I could do that. So I managed to fulfill just enough requirements that they brought me aboard. I need to stress again, I've been talking about a little bit of luck for the past couple of slides. Without the work I did, I would not have had the chance to get lucky. So you have to put the work in, so that way you are ready to take advantage of opportunities that come your way. So now I'm going to play the launch trailer for Golden Abyss. We tested this before the show, so hopefully everyone's going to hear it. And if you've never seen it before, have fun.
Remember why I got into all this?
Of course I remember.
Well, then why don't you tell me why I've wasted so many years working crap jobs for guys like Dante?
They dug up over 60 of the poor bastards.
16th century. New Spain. These guys died a long way from home.
This is Nathan Drake.
Oh, you're the expert on maps, artifacts.
Right.
This is why you're here.
Markings aren't Spanish.
And no one has any idea what it means.
If I'm right, this is the Temple of the Serpents. You don't see that every day.
You ain't seen nothing yet. Come on. Don't dig up anything without me. You got it? I got my eye on you two.
So it's El Generale's army that's headed into the rainforest.
He's not a general anymore.
Tell that to his goddamn army. So much gold, the revolution will live.
What have you done the last 10 years except work piss-ass jobs for schlubs like me?
Pile it on, I can take it.
PlayStation.
Still one of my favorite projects that I've ever worked on. It was a great team, and I was incredibly happy to have that experience. So there are a couple of other factors into being able to get this first job. They're minor, but they did make a little bit of a difference. One, having a bachelor's degree was helpful. It's not a be-all, end-all, and in fact, I know that I'm just going to address that comment right now. I couldn't afford a Vita until years after it came out, so I feel you. So I know people who don't have degrees from college, but are at top of their field. Kind of have like not even what you would consider traditional schooling, but they through their passion, through their hard work, and through just sheer determinants and taking advantage of opportunities they've been given, they have succeeded massively. So degrees help, and they make it much, much easier to work abroad, but it's not a requirement. And that's coming from a professor. I get paid to teach, and I'm just letting you know. Respectful and professional emails, they also are important. You would be surprised at the number of emails that developers get, and we're talking HR, who is handling applications, that are just completely overboard with fanboyisms, or could be wildly unprofessional, or you get a response that you're not expecting, and the professional email goes away and it becomes sheer anger. We love games, and we love the teams that make games, and we want to be a part of those teams. It's still work. It is still a professional atmosphere, even though it's a very, very lax professional atmosphere, if I may say so. You still have to be professional in those emails. And that's something I always maintained. From day one, even through all of the rejections and all of my future rejections, I've always maintained professionalism. Something that's also underrated are interpersonal skills. When you get on the phone and have that phone interview, you need to be able to hold a conversation. And I mean, at 23, I could probably barely do that to some degree, but I did enough. I did enough that I managed to not completely look like a moron in my interviews, and that was key. Another final note is that compared to today, and you heard it earlier, just general overall competition was less fierce. So, why am I not there now? What happened? It goes back to trying to have that longevity. Bend was a one-year contract that did not turn into full-time work. I was a little too green. There were some mistakes I made early on that carried through the project, and I didn't grow as fast as other contractors grew. And looking back, a lot of this actually comes down to just not being a mature enough person. It took me some time to really grow into who I am today. So that was probably the biggest issue. So when the contract ended, it took about 7 months for me to find my next job. There was another contract in Boston with Warner Brothers. And that is a story for another time that actually goes into that bigger personal development. Because I will tell you, when Uncharted shipped, and even when I was looking for a job, I didn't really think too much about why didn't Sony keep me. My focus was on, okay, cool. It's the next job. It's the next place. I'm going to go to a bigger city. And I did. And I very much enjoyed Boston. And there's a lot of life that happened there. But at the same time, if I was able to at least reflect back on why I didn't get kept on, that might have shifted choices I made in Boston too, in a little bit of a different direction. But again, story for another time. So now, GameDev wants you, or Uncle Sam. They both want you. We're talking about GameDev. It's 2020. How are you gonna break in? There's a couple of changes that the current climate in game development means you have to make. Number one is still very, very true. You still need to make a plan. You need to be visible. You need to be visual, and that's both for the artists and designers, and somewhat coders too. You need to be good, and you need to be lucky. So the plan is still the same idea. You need to identify what you want to do and go do it. There's a bit of a change now where specialization, at least in the AAA space, is key. It's gone from an environment artist who makes models, textures, builds the scenes, and probably lights them too. It's gone from that being a single job to you have a material artist who's going to make the textures that then the environment artist might apply. The environment artist might dress the scene, but they're not going to light the scene. That might be handled by a lighting artist. Most of the models are going to be made by outsourcing teams, and so the environment artist is just collating that thing. There's so many micro jobs now because the big studios function more like an assembly line, and that's not to make it sound like it's just grueling, boring work all the time. But if you're in a large AAA studio, they have deadlines, and so breaking jobs up into smaller sections makes it easier for them to get those deadlines met. Indie studios are always going to vary depending on the size and the tools they use, whether or not they're looking for something more specialized or something more generalized. But you can work a little bit of generalization into your specialized portfolio. So there's flexibility there. Identify the time frame you want something done in. Do you want this time frame to be my entire college career? Or do you want it to be the 6 months after you graduate, or the year after you graduate, or so on? So identify the time frame you want to be wrapped up in. And the projects you want to do, focus on what you're interested in. And then finally, you do have to orient your life around making it happen. It's very easy to not let that be the case these days. And even when I started, it was easy to let that not be the case too. But I made that choice. I made that choice to make that the focus of my life. And it was the right choice. Be visible. So unlike the past where all I was on Polycount, there's so much social media now that you kind of need to be out there. You need to be shown being a part of the community. This is especially important for indie studios. They like community members, and certain AAA studios love people who are fans of their games. So you need to make that kind of known. Active feedback on social media to people who are also working just like you to break in. Post your work, even if it's bad. Showing progress clearly in the internet age is something people love. Engage with developers. Don't stalk them or don't constantly hound them. But if there's something that you have a genuine question about, send them a tweet. Ask. Like, hey, how did you do this? Or how would you suggest this? You'd be surprised at how many will actually reply to you. This is something I actually did in 2010 when I was breaking in. And I was nervous about it, so I didn't include a link to my website. But I did get a reply from a very famous game developer asking, hey, you didn't send a link to your portfolio. Where is it? And so I sent it, and I never heard anything again. But the fact I got a reply meant that they were paying attention. If you're going to be using social media, don't post about politics. Just sit on that. And then also don't post about companies at all. If it's positive, no one's going to care. Don't post anything negative. Don't say anything negative. You're trying to get a job, even if you think a certain company is, a little iffy. That's an opinion, and you might be right, but you also are trying to work somewhere. So it's much better for you to just find out on the inside. Finally, learn how to network. Networking is very underrated and important. I would suggest you do this by checking out your local area. Like if you have local meetups, go to them, start talking to people, just get used to it. It took me a little while to do that too, because no one's going to have game developer meetups in Central Indiana. However, excuse me, my first GDC was a good time to get my feet wet and learning how to talk to developers in a professional setting. I have to take another sip of water real quick. So third, visual. You need to be visual. So if you're an artist, you already are going to have to understand art fundamentals. That's how you're making, a living, or how you want to. But it's also important for designers and even coders to some degree. And this is important because you need to know how to compose a scene. That is a good question. And if you can make it clear that they're separate, where one's anonymous and the other one's clearly you could do that. I think that would actually be wise. And I often have wished I have done that myself. So back to visual. Understand art fundamentals. So this is mostly for coders and designers who have to communicate with artists and just have to know how things look. Coding themselves, this is a little less important, but it is moving in a more visual direction. So you need to have a general understanding of how your code might affect certain elements of design or level layout, as well as just how to operate node-based coding solutions like blueprints. Designers need to know how to build aesthetically pleasing gray box designs at the very least, if not kit out their levels on their own. It's very studio dependent, but you need to have good visual skills. So make sure you have a basic understanding of art fundamentals. And that allows you to also communicate with artists, letting them know the fundamentals they need to adjust to match the project's needs. And then be good. This is a slightly depressing slide, but it is important. Competition is exceedingly fierce now. In 2013, there were a massive amount of layoffs in the game industry. 2013 was basically the game industry's 2008, 2009. So they had mass layoffs that was also met with the beginning of a lot of very talented kids from art schools and game-focused schools coming into the job market. So this just meant that there was a glut of talent. Now this is just normally the case. Everyone who's trying to get into games, not everyone is necessarily good, but typically the ones you see out there, or you might see some work posted on social media, they are good. And only the good ones are being even considered. So you need to ask yourself if you are good enough, or if you have the potential to be good enough if you focus your time in it. It takes a lot of time to continue to grow the skills to break you in. And for someone like me, it takes a lot of time to maintain those skills or learn new ones because it's always changing. Perhaps changing disciplines might help you. I actually have a friend, and I think he changed disciplines more because it's just what he's better at. But he went from being a traditional artist to being a tech artist. That was a wise move for him. It fit his skill set better, fit what he likes to do better. And quite frankly, tech art jobs are easier to come by. That's one other thing to think about is what jobs are available and easier to hit. Environment artist jobs, there's a lot of them, but everyone's also good at environment art now. So you have to be really good. Character art jobs, not as many. And all the character artists I've ever met are phenomenal. So you have to be phenomenal. Same with concept. Tech art, well, that's not one of the sexy jobs to go for because no one really thinks about it. But if you're a good tech artist, you don't even necessarily have to be fantastic. You can be good or even serviceable, and studios still need you to like help them. So you have a better chance of getting a job. Same deal with rigging. Like no one likes rigging, so if you're good at rigging, then you can break your foot in that way. So that's another way to think about it. Think about the jobs that are less sexy. Tech art, rigging. Those are visual effects. For some reason, there's not a lot of effects artists. Like there should be plenty more of effects artists. What's tech art? Tech art is more or less the bridge between the technical side, so like code and design, and the art team. It depends on the studio, but typically in my experience, tech art builds tools for the artist to increase their productivity, make their jobs easier, make it easier for their content to get into the game engine, and they can also work on debugging different issues in the game as well, as it's related to the art usually. I'll tell you right now, like a lot of the tech artists I've worked with are some of the smartest people. There's just something about them where they're incredibly smart. On the programming side, I'm not positive. Graphics programming is hard, but they're highly sought after. And if you're a good graphics programmer, you can get a job outside of games doing other crazy stuff too. Gameplay scripting and programming, I'm not sure exactly what the breakdown of skills are there. That might be a question for some of the later presenters. I know that Tony Rowe and Frank Lee, who are colleagues of mine at Drexel, will be speaking in a couple of days. So you may save that for them. They might have a good idea too. So before I move on to the other slide real quick, this is maybe a little extra harsh, but it's not wrong. So the best get hired. And the best of the best get hired where you want to work. So if you want to work at Naughty Dog or Call of Duty or Bungie or the biggest and the best are getting hired there. And then just my standard QA design tool creation. Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. All right, Star Wars Galaxy, I'm actually going to get to your question in a second because I'm about to wrap up, but I think I know what you're talking about. That also reminds me about producers too. So I'll mention a couple other jobs here in a moment. So finally, 5, be lucky. If you follow as much as you can, 1 through 4, the luck will come. Excuse me. It might be freelance or mod teams or startup indie teams. All of these have different pros. They all look good on resumes. I actually had a little bit of freelance, but I had a mod team on my resume when I started talking with Sony back in the day. I did barely any work for the mod team, but I did do work, and it got into their game, so that was a plus. All of those projects teach you valuable skills. They teach you how to collaborate with others, how to work, in a distributed type of setup, and they can lead to bigger and better jobs. And if you do get very lucky and you're good, that full-time opportunity or that really big contract will come along much faster than you think it will. So times have changed. Speaking to Star Wars Galaxy's question really quick, the QA design tool creation, I'm imagining that has to be a bit more with like production tools and producers in general. So producers are, it depends on the studio how many you need, but that tends not to be quite as sexy either unless you're really interested in like tracking stats and trying to make sure everyone stays on tasks. Good producers are hard to come by, and if you can keep everyone on task, your team will love you. They'll also kind of hate you at times because, I don't know, it's just like the curse of being a producer, but that's something to think about too. So it's not hard, or it's hard. It is hard. It's very hard. Everything I've talked about is difficult, but it's not impossible. I'm not especially talented. I just am very good at banging my head against a wall until something happens. So if I could do it, I'm sure all of you can pull it off too. One of the great things about being alive now and trying to get into the industry is that you have all of the tools. I didn't have quite everything in the same way. I may have had to get some tools through super special ways, if you know what I mean. You don't have to do that. Autodesk makes Maya free, available for like a year at this point under an educational license. Unreal Engine is free. Unity is free. All of the main game engines are free in one way or another. Blender is basically production ready. It's a great tool to learn now, and you can do 3D modeling immediately. You don't have to worry about whether or not you're in school or you have to worry about the license. Blender is free. It's ready to go. Krita is an image editing program. It's meant more for painting, but it works for making hand textures if you need to. Quixel Mixer is also free. So there's a lot of options for you. Like, tools are everywhere. DZK, I will answer your question in a moment. But the answer is not exactly, but it's still used. ZBrush and Substance are industry standard tools, and they have low cost. ZBrush, you can buy a full license for, I think, like $800 or $900 now, but you get the new version free every single time it comes out. And if you just want to learn it, you can also pay a pretty low monthly fee to have full access to it for a couple of months. Substance is one of the best deals in the game industry. And then you have asset stores and kits. So you can actually, as long as you don't try and pass off the work as your own, use other people's work to showcase your skills. And I actually have an example for you right after this. YouTube. I didn't have nearly the amount of tutorials that you have now. And I also used YouTube to keep up to date on as much as I can. So you have tons of ways to augment whatever you're learning in school. The key, I think, is if you question, how do I do something, or why is this being done this way? You have a curious personality. You want to learn more. And if you do that, you will be fine and you will succeed. So this is an example of one of my friends' works. His name's Jeff, and he works as mostly a lighting artist, but he also works as like a shot composer, kind of a semi-cinematographer in Unreal Engine. And for a while, he was working at Ubisoft in India on the upcoming Prince of Persia remake, which he also saw the trailer. His work's not in that game anymore, unfortunately. But this is a piece of his work. And what's key to think about here is that his skill set lies in lighting and composition. He didn't make any of the individual assets you see here. everything here is Quixel Megascans. This is an asset kit, and this is from Paragon. He composed and built the scene. He did the lighting. He did all of that, and he presents it that way. He doesn't try to say that this is all of his work. And you can do this too. I'll get to you in a second to Bonster. And finally, a note on remote work, since we're, kind of in that era right now. I asked a couple of people for some opinions before doing this talk, just to get an idea to kind of share with you. So smaller teams, this happened very quickly once the pandemic started, is that they've just adopted, you know what, we're just going to be remote from now on. Some new startups, even before COVID, were remote first. So this is, for smaller teams and startups, is going to be kind of the norm. Outside of that, no one knows anything. Every company is going to be doing something different. Some companies are allowing very, very senior people to go remote to be with family and to just, like, that's what they're going to do for the rest of their working career at that studio anyway. Others are looking to shift to some sort of hybrid model in 2021, but they don't really know what that is. No one knows anything. So my personal hope, having been someone who's spent a lot of my time working remotely as well as being on site, is that it's going to be a mix, and that at least having some workers work mostly remote will be the new norm everywhere. So I hope I helped. We're going to do Q&A here. Anything is fair game. I'm going to take care of the 2 questions here in the chat, and then, yeah, anything else you want to ask, go nuts. You are more than welcome to send me an email or connect on ArtStation and, ask for portfolio reviews or whatever you want to do. So let's start with DZNK312. The go-to for 3D models. If you're working in-house at most AAA studios, Maya is their standard. It's their standard tool set, especially Sony. Sony has a lot of studios that actually have engines that are bolted into Maya itself. So if you can learn Maya, I do suggest it. It is a pipeline tool. However, if you are more interested, or you just want to, make 3D models and stuff, Blender is 100% production capable. And if your eventual game engine, like where everything you're making is going to either Unity, Unreal, CryEngine, any of those third-party engines, as long as it gets in there and functions, most studios don't care. So if your answer is, should I learn Blender? I would learn both Blender and Maya. Bonster, is it better to come into the industry with 3D or 2D design skills? Well, 3D and 2D design skills all build on each other. So I think if you have one, you have the other. I actually spent this summer practicing my 2D sketching skills, and specifically to kind of build my artistic eye a little bit. It's gotten a little lazy. So I worked on that, and I did it through sketching most of the time. And it's made an impact in my work. It's not necessarily massive because of the way I had to split my time, but it's definitely made a difference. So I think both are important. I'm just gonna thumb through to my last slide. Fun little story about this for anyone who's still hanging out. So this is one of my scenes from Uncharted. This was one of the rooms I did some layout in, and this chair was one of the props I built for the game. And I originally had blood on the chair, and because Uncharted is a teen-rated game, I had to take it out, and it made me sad because the blood was cool. Star Wars Galaxy. You should. I would say both. Recommended on focusing, getting an internship, or creating a game on your own. If you're doing an internship, I think that is probably better because it allows you to get into a studio and meet people and learn from others. Internships in the gaming industry are very difficult, but it sounds like, from some stuff I've heard both at Drexel and from others in the industry, that studios are now realizing we should probably do something about this, because we have, like, we need more people, and we don't always want to pay to relocate from, California to New York or vice versa, because that gets expensive. So I would say internship first, but you can still kind of make your own little thing on the side. So there's no reason not to. More about the blood on the chair. I don't remember when in production I made this particular prop, but it was just like blood splatter in Photoshop. Like the textures I used to make this were mostly in Photoshop, and it just like, I don't know. I thought it was fine, and I'm pretty sure, I don't remember if it was Gerald or Frank. I think it was Frank, who was the art director. Was like, "Oh yeah, you can't have this." So I had to go into my texture and remove it. But I built my texture with a bunch of layers, so it was easy to remove. But it was pretty funny. I don't remember if I had any other crazy stories quite like. Oh, I do have one. This is not how you want to make a first impression on your first day. So, or like first week, I guess. I was working on building some like terrain asset or something, and I had a question about, I don't remember if it was a question, but I think the tech artist Jake walked by and noticed I was doing something really weird with my UVs, and he was like, "Why don't you just tile them?" And I didn't understand that you could actually take UVs in Maya's UV space and just scale it and make the texture's resolution better because of it. So once he showed that to me, I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you could do that. That's cool." And I could see when he walked away, in his eyes, he was like, "Holy crap, who did we hire?" He immediately realized, "Oh, he doesn't know as much as we thought he did." But I also think that means they didn't look deeply enough at my portfolio, because if they did, they would have known that I didn't tile any textures that should have been tiled at the time. Student made projects from my students. Is that if that is the question, I would say yes. I can show one right now, actually, since I am screen sharing still. Give me a second. It's a wonderful little piece. So I'm gonna keep the volume very, very low. So I'm just gonna move this over here. So this is from an Animation 100 class. So this is freshman. This is a freshman class. They're touching this software for the first time. And it's an aggressive class in the sense that this is like a full-on production to some degree. It's expected that it's pretty simple. And they blew me away with this because it has a nice little beginning to end story. And it fulfilled all of the things that I wanted out of this particular project. So it made an impression on me, and I've keep an eye and in touch with a number of the students on this project still. They're still in school, so but they're great. I usually try to keep in touch with other students who usually do a pretty solid job with their projects too. But this is the one that always comes to my mind. It's a 100 level class. It's an intro class, and they pulled off something that was way more than I was expecting. Star Wars Galaxy, I have a question for you. When you play a game, what do you gravitate towards the most? Or what seems most interesting? Because if you're saying design is your focus, You should focus on level design, level scripting, but also scene composition. I guess when you're making a game, what gets you most excited? I'm going to go ahead and scroll to the last slides here. If you haven't already, which I'm sure you are, follow Bit Project on all of their social media pages. Mechanics and game functionality. So, at least for you, DZNK, I would core mechanics and gameplay features. Okay, so I would focus, both of you, I think, on mostly learning, and it doesn't have to be blueprints, but I tend to be an Unreal person, so I think in that world. Learn blueprint scripting, and that's built on C++, so learning C++ would be helpful. If you prefer other tools, then learn those. Like coding languages, if you know one, you should be able to pick up other ones that are related fast enough. But learn them so that you have at least an understanding of the language. Learn scripting tools, like blueprints. Python is helpful. And if you have that, you have the tools you need to build those core mechanics you're talking about. And then it's just a matter of attaching those core mechanics to elements. So I think the two of you shouldn't focus so much on building characters or using your own art or your own levels. The levels are different, but using your own art to make things. I think you should use other people's art and take that and use it to create interesting level compositions that fit the gameplay mechanics that you've built. I think that's the best way to go about something like that. Trying to do everything yourself gets very overwhelming these days. And unless you're some sort of like super genius, there's very, very few people who can do that, who can do literally everything on their own and make it quality. Yeah, you've got a library of assets out there with Unity and Unreal. So grab some stuff and just decide what type of mechanics you want to explore and start making stuff and throwing it together. Cornered Ape. Hey, it could be. I don't know who that is, but if they're able to make and do literally everything really fast and it's good quality, then good for them. They exist. I know they exist. Yep, there you go.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm back. Thank you so much, Daniel, for that presentation. I think it was really informative, and we got some really awesome questions from the audience, too. So good job, everyone. We do have 2 more events. So in an hour from now, UMBC is going to be hosting a workshop on Intro to Blender, I think. And an hour from then, we're going to have our first stand-up. So everyone's invited to the stand-up. You get to go talk about ideas for your projects. If you've already started, you can talk about your progress so far and what you're looking forward to within the next week. You can play test your games. If you have like a lot done, you can help other students work on theirs as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Daniel.
Not a problem. All of you have fun watching going to the Blender thing. That's going to be great.
Yeah. Really awesome. Bye, everyone.